Hi, hello, and welcome to another podcast talking about existentialism. This will be the first and presumably the last and only episode of this podcast. And in this first episode, we will be talking about the meaning of freedom. This podcast is inspired by one of my favorite shows, and in my opinion, one of the shows that has the most innovative concept out of any of the shows that are currently airing, and that is The Midnight Gospel. This is a Netflix show that was produced by Duncan Trussell, and it is based on a concept of having previously made podcasts turned into an animated show. How Netflix defines it is traversing trippy worlds inside his universe simulator. A spacecaster explores existential questions about life, death, and everything in between. And I would say that this is the best way to sum it up because it truly is a complex show, but it manages to present itself in such a nonchalant manner. Out of all of the 8 episodes, I would have to say that my favorite episode would have to be Annihilation of Joy, which speaks exactly about the topic that we are going to discuss today, freedom. The thing that is quite common with freedom and defining freedom is that it depends heavily on the exterior effects, which looking into the show, I would confidently say is wrong on a lot of levels. When we talk about freedom, we often argue that we would like to be freed from stress, from different types of personal anguishes, from some, again, exterior effects that are pressuring us into certain states. But what this show is trying to say that the existential trap is actually within us. And this is what we are going to talk about. At the beginning of the episode, we are introduced to the main characters who are located in the so-called soul prison, where they are enraged with their existential dread. The premise of it is that we are actually constantly enslaved in this feeling of our own identity, or better to say, not understanding it, not being at peace with who we are. And that's where the frustration of constantly trying to change that comes. We are in a way afraid of feeling of that suffering and not being what we think we are. We are afraid of just relaxing and letting ourselves be. Essentially, what the guest speaker is trying to say is that we are afraid of time passing. So we pursue that character we are seen as instead of just simply accepting ourselves as we are. And I would say this is not really a modern problem, but it is a problem of majority, if not everyone. And of course, some people throughout their lives, they manage to get out of this existential dread. But a lot of people constantly have this turmoil inside them where they try to chase their identity while simultaneously failing at it. Accidentally, it happens to be that one of my favorite books talks exactly about this topic, or at least a segment of it, and it's Uno, Nessuno e Centomila, or One, No One and 100,000 by Luigi Pirandello. What is the premise of the book is that though we do exist as a being, we are never only one being, as we are perceived in so many ways by so many people, and there could never be a single version of us. With that in mind, it was really interesting for me to see in which direction the author of the show is going to go, as well as his guest speaker. And surprise, surprise, we go to Buddhism. And basically, what Buddhism claims here is that we can rely on this feeling of existing and just being where we are in the moment and being who we are through meditation, through mindfulness, and through just pausing and taking our time to process everything, to get to be our essential selves. But the true connection with Pirandello's book actually lies behind the idea that all the consciousnesses are actually connected in a net. We are not a single being, and everything is empty of inherent quality. That being said, we are not being just as ourselves. We are being within this net, the network that functions, and through it we should try to understand who we are, not through only our eyes, but through this net and connection with everyone else in it. It is definitely a hard pill to swallow, but the fact that there's no one essential self means that we should embrace that and try to understand our position within the net. And I believe that this is pivotal to just relieve that anguish that often eats us alive. And of course, it is fully understandable that meditation or any form of meditation isn't really for everyone, and not everyone can really do it despite all the efforts. But just being silent and being in the moment, being mindful of where we are, who we are, what we want to be, and what we want to achieve is truly important for us to know where we stand in this whole moment and what we can expect from the future. Because if we continue this way, we are just going to squirm around this feeling that time is going to pass us by and our identity is just going to go away with it. That being said, one of the main directions that this guest speaker takes, which also claims that we should not stick to this perceived personality, is non-essentialism, the one that claims that everything is empty of inherent quality. By definition, non-essentialism argues that there is no essence or set of common predetermined qualities belonging to entities in the world. And this can oftentimes be interpreted as nihilism, though it is not. Non-essentialism just tries to relieve us from all the things that are in our way and that do not really hold any significant value in our lives. My personal take on this topic would be more so optimistic nihilism, which essentially states that yes, we are insignificant and yes, time is going to pass us by, but in this moment when we do exist, we should give it our best to actually enjoy it and to achieve something that is meaningful to us personally. With that, I would like to include the author's message as well, of the mindfulness of being present, as it is truly the idea that time passes, the only one that will actually hold on, the only one that is 100% sure. It is also important to note that when we do feel stress or those anguishes that are exterior, it is primarily to blame on our problems within. So as long as we settle with those, we should be able to take care of the exterior ones as well. For example, let's take a situation where you're pressured by your surroundings to become a doctor. You shift the blame on the exterior effects on being a doctor, on your family who has high standards, but essentially it is important that you know what you feel inside and how do you feel about your identity, what do you want to be, what do you want to achieve. After that, everything is easier to solve. To be fair, I'm definitely not the person that should be giving any kind of advice, because I would definitely not describe myself as mindful. But for the last couple of years, I definitely put more efforts into being aware of my surroundings, into just tuning myself in with everything around me. That's meaning taking a walk and just focusing on the walk itself, focusing on the cement, on the trees, on the cars, on everything that surrounds me, and taking this time as valuably as you can. To conclude this podcast, what I would recommend you to do is just to watch The Midnight Gospel. Maybe it is for you, maybe it's not. It's definitely a bit harder to follow and actually watch and listen to what's going on. But if you are interested in this type of topics, it is definitely a great show and covers a lot of similar topics that are quite interesting and taking into a bit of a different perspective. Thank you for listening.